Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to the High Strangeness podcast. I'm Tony, and this is the place where we talk about all things strange and unexpected in our reality. One of the things I love about hosting this show is having the opportunity to meet amazing people who I can learn from and just get information from and then share it. And so I'm excited because today we have somebody who's been involved in many things and is involved in strange stuff and looking at all of it from different angles. And so with that, the person I'm speaking with today is Linda Eastburn. She's somebody who's well known in the space and has been doing research and different things for many, many years. And we're going to find out about that in just a minute. But before we get into any of that, Linda, welcome to the show. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I'm excited to hear. I've heard you before as well, and just a wealth of knowledge and things that you will bring to this show. I'm excited for that. So, Linda, where are you at today? Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Springfield, Missouri, right in the heart of the country and right in the heart of the Ozarks.
Amazing. You know, I've been to Missouri, Springfield area before, I think, a little bit, and I like it out there. It's kind of cool. I've not had the chance to go back after that, but hoping to do some trips out that way in the near future. Do you like it out there? Is that have you been there all your life, or is that a place you went to?
I've been here most of my life. I lived in Colorado for a time, but most of my life has been spent right here in the Ozarks. And yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. You know, we have so many trees and forests and rivers and lakes. It's just a really great nature place.
Yeah. Well, you know, as we get into talking about a lot of stuff here today, I was just, for everybody listening, I was talking to Linda a second before we started the recording saying, I've got so many questions that I know I won't get to them all, but we're going to see where the discussion goes. Would you take a minute and just tell the audience a little bit about your background and the things you've done over the years? I mean, I know you've looked at stuff since the 80s. Oh my gosh. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, you know, unusual stuff kind of has followed me around a lot of my life, but it was really back in the 80s that I started doing or started going to a UFO research meeting. And that opened up doors to, you know, really understanding that there's so many weird things that are going on out there. And that kind of led over into looking at some, you know, just paranormal things as a whole. And then, of course, the last few years, I've been really invested in the whole Bigfoot phenomenon, all the cryptids. So all of those combined, you know, I wrote my third book, Threshold to Encounters, about all of those experiences that I'd heard about for all of those years, and the connections I felt like, you know, kind of happened between those. On a personal level, I started really going into down a rabbit hole, you know, in about the late 80s, looking at some of the unusual things that you could do, like deep intuition and remote viewing and things like that, which is also another offshoot kind of up a lot of the paranormal things. And so that just opened up even more doors. I do hypnosis as well. Financially, I'm a real estate investor, and I've used a lot of this type of remote viewing and things like that to enhance my business. But also I've used it a lot to look at UFOs, look at cryptids, look at, you know, paranormal things, and unusual stuff just draws me in. The mystery of it all I just love.
I love that. Well, and you know what? Here we are already. Before I get to my questions, you just made me think of something. I'm thinking about remote viewing. You know, I've heard a bunch about it, and I've seen some different people talk about this. I'm trying to imagine for myself, how does a person utilize this information? Now, you just said how you do. I'm curious because I know the military and you know, that area, they have their purpose for doing it. But is there an application for the average person? So you kind of went into it. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I teach people. So yeah, it's something that's really familiar to me. I use it and I teach it. So, you know, practical use of being able to see things beyond your five senses, basically. With remote viewing, I mean, I used it in real estate a lot. I could see things, what things would sell for, where investments might be located, what the type of investment was. It was something that really guided me. Now, I had one kind of exceptional experience. There was an auction coming up, and it was a little beyond our price range because we were pretty new investors at the time. But we're talking about prices also back in the 90s, early 90s. But this house had sold a couple of times for about $1 million. It was on 22.22 acres of land. It was a 3-story house, 8,000 square feet, big, beautiful pool in the backyard. And in that era, that $1 million house would be about a $5 or $6 million house today. So it was going to come up for auction in about 3 weeks. We would often go out and look at open houses when they popped up if they were going to be auctioned. And this one we knew was out of our price range, but we went anyway. It was a nice Sunday afternoon. What else do we have to do? So we went to the open house. It was fabulous. We were driving around the property, and all of a sudden I had this intuitive impression, which sometimes we would be like a download. Suddenly the information was just there. I couldn't stop from saying it. It just blurted out, and I said, this is going to sell for $300,000. And my husband said, well, if this sells for $300,000, we need to buy it, because that was more in the price range that we could afford. But we didn't have $300,000 sitting there. And as auctions go, you really have to come up with that money within like 3 weeks. When it sells, you need to know that you've got your cash in hand. So we went and applied for a loan, and we qualified for a $300,000 loan, but there was X amount of down payment we needed. We didn't even have that. But it just so happened within that period of time, 2 people approached us. We didn't even approach them, to buy 2 small properties we owned and could close that week. They could pay cash, and we had the money for the down payment. So we went to the auction 3 weeks later. We bid. We had the highest bid at $300,000. And the auctioneer said sold, and we bought that house for $300,000, and it was about $1 million property. So, yeah, that was one way that my intuition really paid off for us. But it often paid off in real estate, because we were always looking for things. So I could sometimes see that there was an investment out there somewhere, and so then we would have to look for it, and in the remote viewing, I would know where it would be. But for the practical average person that doesn't do real estate investing, you can use it for all sorts of things. What's going to be my best opportunity in life? And that's my 4th book, Spy Your Way to Power and Success, is just about that. It's about seeing those opportunities sitting out there for you. So that's one thing you can do. Now, in the paranormal world, I kind of look at the experiences that people have had. When I hear a speaker talk about some unusual phenomena that's happened to them, I'll go in and remote view that to see if I can get any more detail regarding that. Those are really hard things to verify, however, and I'm kind of a stickler for verification. Take it with a grain of salt, keep it back there on the back burner. Let's see if more evidence comes through that verifies this for us so we can know if it's true or not. But that's another way that you can use it even in the field. We've even remote viewed cryptids, to see where they are sitting out there in our area of research.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've heard the protocol, and maybe it's just a very rigid way that the military uses it with numbers and the sequence and stuff like that. But you're saying there's really other ways to massage this way of looking at things. So you found different ways to look at it.
Well, I started out with more of the Edgar Cayce method, which a lot of people don't know what his method was because he was back there so far. But he used more of a hypnotic type of induction. And in that very deep inner level state of mind, he was able to get information. Now, that's my I guess, way of doing it by choice. But the protocol that the military uses, I do that, I teach that, but it's really good for like physical things, unless you get into those really deep levels of it, however, and you're willing to spend a half a day looking at something. You don't get into a lot of the things that I look at. And what I found was I could go into it much faster, my method, than some of the remote viewing protocol method. But it all ended up working, pretty accurate. I did it at first without knowing the military version of remote viewing, so I only had my hypnotic version. So I had heard about it at a conference where a man had gone to Russia, spoken with some remote viewers. I don't even think they were calling it remote viewing at that time. But he came back and gave a lecture about these people, that they were actually using this, kind of psychic ability to see and spy, on U.S. bases and submarines and all kinds of things. So I come home from that conference and I'm thinking, oh, how can I do this? I'd never really thought about utilizing this in that way before with physical stuff. But boy, what a great way to verify it. And I'm there again, I'm a stickler for verification. So I decided to take a phone book. There again, we're talking probably 89 or so, take a phone book. And if it had a phone number beside an address, I'm assuming there's a house there, right? So I would just pick these random addresses that I did not know what that neighborhood looked like, and I would go into this, kind of hypnotic state and ask myself to view that home from like the middle of the road and describe it to a T. So the first one I did, there was this baby blue colored house showed up, and I was like, but every part of my intuition, and this is where fine tuning that intuition, when you're right, you kind of get a feeling when you're wrong. And there was a baby blue house showed up, and every part of my being said, that is not the house at this address. Erase that. So I did. And I went back in, and when I went back in, I was really close to the house. I was like right there, faced right next to the siding of the home. I could see the paint running down that's how close I was. So as I moved back to the middle of the street where I told myself to go to start with and kind of missed my target, I could see a small ranch-style house with a one-car garage. There was a black roof, white or gray siding, and a picture window in the front. There was this little sidewalk that went up to a small little porch that was covered with that carpet, that old green grassy carpet, that a lot of people used back in that day. There was a white wrought iron little post, at the end of the porch. And there was one tree in the yard, very well placed, right in the center of the front yard, and that's what I saw. Later that day, I drove by, and the baby blue colored house was right next door. So I missed it, but it got my attention over there, but I knew it wasn't the one I was supposed to be viewing. So I got two things wrong. I transposed the garage, and that is really easy to do with remote viewing, to get it on the wrong side. So I did transpose the garage. It was a one-car garage. It was a little ranch-style house, exactly as I thought. And I also saw it, I either saw it as white or gray, light gray, but it was the opposite of that. So there were two things I got wrong in that. But I set out after that because I realized, okay, pretty accurate. So I decided after that to start doing this weekly, to just do several a week and then take a day and drive by them and see how I was to get an accuracy rate. I did that for about a year, found out I had about an 85% accuracy rate on those. So I've kind of held with that number of being pretty good at what I do, but I'm not 100% by any means. Anyone who says they are is just lying to you. Because you can't be 100% on this all the time. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, well, 80% is pretty darn good. That's actually amazing.
Good, yeah.
That's really good.
I trust you. Yeah.
Well, and it's cool that you found ways to use it. And I'm glad that you mentioned this, because I just, in my mind, I'm thinking, how do you use this? But that's amazing to find ways that you can actually use it to help in life and kind of prepare yourself for the path that you need to go down to. Well, let's hop into some other things here. So I want to start off first. I'm curious. I think it's really interesting that right now and lately there's this whole disclosure thing with UAP and stuff. I mean, we've got everything from the S4 Lazar movie to Age of Disclosure, and now soon Spielberg's Disclosure Day, and then you even see war.com or war.gov with the releases from the government. This time in our history here is amazing to me. Like, have you seen anything like this in such a short period of time before, and what do you think about that?
Well, the disclosure that's come out so far, anyone that's really deeply invested in UFO research, there's nothing new. We all knew most of that was there. So they're not releasing anything that is like really vital at this point. However, it does seem like a lot of people that have more information than I have are starting to come forward with more information that they have, not feeling as if now they're going to step on any toes to be able to disclose some of that. And some of that are the remote viewers that are really, really well versed with this, some of that. I've done a lot of remote viewing of the alien things, and a lot of what they're releasing follows suit with what I've seen, definitely. I think we are in a really unusual period of time. I honestly didn't think they would come forth with this, but now that they have, I mean, they're not going to be able to take it back, that's for sure. I think we're kind of being prepared for, a different society. We're going to be in a different space, very, very soon, I think, with this. Of course, a lot of theories are out there, and some I can really agree with. One is that because the U.S. especially has been so hush-hush and really denied that this even exists, for so many years, just, you could not go there. It was just not something that was discussed or admitted or even an inkling of, of reality in it. So now they're kind of saying, okay, well, it was there all along, we just didn't tell you, so they're disclosing it. But lots of reasons why. One is that they want students coming along to begin to think in terms of going into a field that can better understand some of the technology, perhaps, that we are going to need to understand if this whole circle of alien, interaction and technology and space travel and all of these things begin to happen. We may need to have some smart minds on that. So that's one theory that's come forward. I think that could be a reality. We will not, I think, tell anything that would in any way indicate that we know anything about that technology, because that's going to be a secret, top, non-disclosed part of this whole phenomenon. Another thing is, and I'm kind of leery because of all the denial that we've had with this. What are we going to do with this whole issue, with religion? And even though a lot of top religious people, maybe the Catholic Church especially, may have some knowledge of this, I mean, there are an awful lot of religions out there that just don't kind of go with this. So I'm not sure how that gap is going to close itself at this point in time. I'm not sure how they're going to deal with that, but obviously it's not an issue at this moment to to assume that it's going to be a problem. Now, I know a lot of the religious community looks at this alien issue as being demonic, so they put it in their religion, but they put it in a very negative space in their religion. So that could be kind of a scary thing if a lot of people on the planet begin to look at this interaction as being demonic and anti Christian in our nation, especially being a little bit more Christian oriented. That could put a real divide of how we're going to deal with it. You can't sit down with an outer space alien whatever and and begin to have some kind of a community with them if there are a lot of people on the planet assuming that you're hobnobbing and sitting to the dinner table with some demons. That's not very well. So it's going to be a challenge, I think, to really interface how society looks at this and then how the politics look at it and how we're going to mesh it all together, because there are some strange, unusual divides and philosophies and beliefs out there.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how this all kind of reshapes just the way society looks at all of this, for sure, with religion and other places, really finding ways to not look at this. And then now they're going to be forced to look at this. And so it is going to be interesting. Now, I do know, like, there are circumstances where people don't remember or recall experiences they've had, whether it's an abduction or something like that. And probably more people have had situations than we know. You've done work in regression and hypnosis, correct?
Yes.
And I was wondering if you had any experiences there, like, what did you find? Have you ever talked to somebody who's had an experience where that you helped pull it out of them? And then was there anything ever really disturbing or even compelling that you've pulled from those sessions?
A lot of it. Back in the 90s, I got involved with a MUFON group, and I was working as a hypnotherapist at that time, and the head of that MUFON group was also a hypnotherapist, and he was just overwhelmed with people at that point wanting to go through that hypnotic regression to figure out if they had any kind of contact or they had a memory back there that was vague and they wanted to know more. So he would shuffle the overflow to me. So I did a lot of hypnotic regression. I remember the first one I did was just, I mean, it was just so traumatizing for that person and a little traumatizing for me because the fear was so strong. And she had a memory of a light or something, you know, when she was young at her home, and she didn't know what happened from there, something like that. And then when we got into the regression, she had ventured out into the yard. There was a light there, and they had taken her, and that's when she was just frantic, and they did some kind of, you know, physical procedures with her, and she was so afraid. I mean, I was concerned about her, so I had to, you know, just bring her into a position where she could just see it as a screen memory and not actually experience it as if she were actually there. So that was kind of my induction into doing the hypnotic regression work, and from there it just went on. And yes, many people have had some unusual experiences with UFOs, with aliens, and other creatures. I mean, just all kinds of memories that are kind of tucked away. Now, you know, hypnosis isn't a truth serum, so I want to say that, but it is a good way to access information that you need to process somehow, some way. And so something is sitting there as a trauma of some sort. And if you can put a story around it in some fashion, I'm not saying these memories aren't real, but I'm saying that it isn't a total truth serum. So you have to be cautious about assuming that. But I did a lot of those, and missing time is a big thing. It's huge in the world of UFO abduction. But you know what? It's also big with people who have Bigfoot experiences. I was just amazed when I started doing the podcast, the Bigfoot podcast, how many people had those very same identical experiences, just, you know, massive amounts of missing time. So what's happening during that time? It's like, and somebody the other day, it was like jumping ahead in time. It's like they went from one location to another, had no idea. There was no time lapse. It wasn't even the 15, 20 minutes it would take to drive that. They were just there. So that was another thing. So it really makes you question time itself. You know, that I don't think we understand time completely. And missing time, we assume something happened during that time. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Maybe it was a time warp. We don't really know. But they will often end up in a different place, a different location. So that's also, you know, somehow they had to get there. And they have no means of knowing that. When you hypnotize them, some people can remember, you know, various things that might have happened. Sometimes they're on a ship. Sometimes they can't remember that. It's just a blank black, you know, black darkness that's just there. But it is certainly a part of the experience.
Yeah. You know, and what you're talking about here kind of leads me to what I was starting to think about, which is there's a lot of, or in the past, there was a lot of siloing with UFOs, cryptids, and different things. And it is interesting that more people are willing to look at how there's some cross phenomenon here and some commonalities or threads. And so with these things, even ghosts or even missing time or people like you were talking about, do you see those as completely separate issues, or do you see those in some cases where there is definitely some crossover?
Well, what we have, the experience itself is definitely a crossover. Whether they are separate events or not is yet to be fully known. But what I can say is, in an observation of what people are describing they are experiencing, there's definitely a crossover. When you think about a Bigfoot appearing out of nowhere and disappearing suddenly, that reminds me a lot of a ghost, you know, because ghosts will appear and it's vague and then they're gone sometimes. Hearing a sound, but there's no indication of where that sound's coming from, sounds also like a ghost. Bigfoot does that often, but it's in the woods. We have no idea. Another thing on the UFOs, where aliens can sometimes be witnessed to come into a house or something in a certain location, there's often a real high footprint of, you know, like radiation. The electromagnetic field detectors will spike in that area. Well, now it's coming out because Bigfoot investigators are getting real savvy about their investigations now. They're taking those electromagnetic field detectors with them. They're measuring this thing. So now where in an area they'll see a Bigfoot go by, they'll go measure it. Guess what? There's a high level of electromagnetic field detected there. It's a radiation footprint, is left behind. There's also, just recently I heard this, and I only have one person verifying this. This isn't coming from a lot of people yet, but he said when he heard a wood knock, which is typical of a Bigfoot, that the electromagnetic field detector will spike just hearing the wood knock. Well, that indicates maybe that isn't necessarily Bigfoot picking up a big stick and hitting a piece of wood, or some people even think they're doing it with their mouth. They're just making that sound. We don't know what it is, but it could be some kind of a mechanically made or electromagnetically made field that makes that sound, that knocking sound. Now, I've only heard that one time, and I had a group of remote viewers. I was doing a show called Intuitive Journeys. And we had remote view. We were trying to remote view. I'm kind of a Skinwalker Ranch fan, so we were trying to remote view any area and around our neck of the woods that had a portal of some sort. Is there one? Can we find one? And one of the remote viewers indicated there was this lake that was just north of where I live that had some kind of a portal energy. So we decided to go out there and do a day of filming at that lake area. And we're all just sitting there at a picnic table, discussing everything, filming it too. And all of a sudden I hear this big, loud wood knock. It was the middle of the afternoon. And I never heard that before. And I just said, what was that? And a seasoned researcher next to me said, it sounded like a wood knock to him. It was an idle thing, but that was something that was there. Another interesting thing about that very same lake, though, a donut-shaped UFO had been witnessed going across that lake once, some years ago. I'd heard about that. A Bigfoot had been seen at the headwaters of that lake a few years back, not far from where we were at that picnic table. And not far from there's this cave that is crystal lined, and there's a water resource that runs into this lake itself. And there's also this unusually tall mountainous like peak. It's tall enough it made it on the maps. That's how tall it is. And so all of those kind of things you kind of fit together to have kind of an unusual array of stuff that's happened in that area. So we filmed there. We didn't see or hear anything other than that wood knock, but some really interesting things have happened out at that lake.
Yeah, that is interesting. I had so my son-in-law's brother is a very handy guy, and he's he's in Alaska, in a small island up there, and there's almost nobody there, and he's rebuilding a cabin for somebody, and he's up there by himself. And he had sent a recording back to his brother, my son-in-law, saying, and he was nervous because he was like, I've heard these things that it's like banging on wood.
Yeah.
Which when I did hear it, I was like, this is wood knocks. But here's the interesting thing that he verified, and I could even hear it through the sound. It sounded way more powerful than even if you took a bat and hit a tree. It was like percussive, and you could feel, and he even said he could feel it in his chest, which may suggest that you're right. Maybe it's more than hitting a tree with something. Maybe there's something that really is some kind of an energy force or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of and a lot of people have said that they hear things like a stomp, and it literally vibrates the earth. And so they associate that with something very large that is moving or stomping on the ground. And it may very well may be, but it also could be another phenomena that we're dealing with rather than just a creature out in the woods stomping. But they feel it all the way through them.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. Hi, did you know High Strangeness may be looking for you? Have you ever seen something or experienced something strange? If so, I want to know. Go to this website or email me here. Thanks, and let's get back to the show. Well, we're kind of talking about some of this too, but one of the things I was going to ask you is just about how some of these cryptids, which I believe they do exist. The more I've looked into it, I'm like, these things are not like a story. These things are real. And a lot of different reasons why that could be. But the thing is that I find very interesting is in some cases they appear to just disappear, like from one step to the next, which I think is crazy. It reminds me of the 411 Politis, his thing where he talks about tracks just stopping at one point. It really suggests to me that they're stepping into something, or they're walking from one, from one dimension to another, or something like that. Are you seeing things like that, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I hear about that all the time. I mean, that's not uncommon. About 50% of my audience that watches my show is probably just flesh and blood, pure flesh and blood. That's a lot of them have had that experience, and so it doesn't waver. But I interviewed someone the other day that she had 3 Bigfoot experiences over the years. And up until the last one, she would have told you it's flesh and blood, creature in the woods, period. But she saw the same thing. This thing was going at a full, fast gait, walked behind a tree that wasn't very big, nowhere near big enough to hide this Bigfoot. Should have come out on the other side. She should have been able to clearly see it. It did not. It wasn't, and if it just stopped behind the tree, it couldn't have hit it because it was much larger than the tree. So she said after that she had to question, what it is. But Native Americans for years have said that this is keepers of the forest. They live between worlds. So sometimes I wonder if they're not the spirit of the trees, because they come and go out of trees and wooded areas. They do seem to live mostly in a wooded environment. Some people think they're part of the Fae world. They're like fairies. They're the keepers of the trees, and they're big because trees are generally large and big. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but it would make maybe some sense that maybe that world is more real and more prominent than we realize.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's interesting to me too, because I can't remember Dr. Raya something other. I forget her name, but she's in one of those Bigfoot expedition type shows that have been out. Anyway, it was that show where they were showing that they also picked up a frequency when these things would disappear, which reminds me of Skinwalker Ranch. So it does suggest something opening up, and who knows? They're walking in and out of something, or I don't know. Very bizarre.
Well, and it makes me wonder, when people have missing time, going back to that, if they're not, moving into some kind of a weird space where they're just not in this physical world, and so time passes here, then they somehow manage to make it back here, and but they don't know exactly what world they're in, but it's definitely someplace different than here, our reality here.
Yeah. Now, do you think in some cases perceptions can be altered by any of these cryptids? I'm thinking, for instance, where I know sometimes there's been stories where with Bigfoot there's severe fear that comes up on somebody. It almost feels like it was put upon them. And then in the UFO space, they'll see owls, or they'll see, something else, which suggests that there's something's been placed into their mind. Do you think this is common when dealing with phenomena?
Well, I think one of two things. I think, yes, it can very well be a projection where they see something that's not real, and even their emotions be, projections. I think that can happen, and very well may be what happens. I think the other thing is just understanding, we try to fill in the blanks and make sense of our world. So we may be seeing something, we don't know what that is, so we make it, in our minds, we think, well, that was a deer, or that was an owl, or something like that, because we need an explanation for it. We don't like to deal with ambiguity, so we fill in the blanks with things. So it could be one or the other. I do know that there is, mechanisms that our government owns that can definitely project images. I mean, there was the Cuban situation where they were going to project a hologram of Jesus Christ returning to the earth, and try to fool the people in that regard. So I know that's been used. I know there have been places and times that holograms are used to make us think that something is real when it isn't real. So that is something. It could be technology, it could be advanced technology from these other races that can just project whatever they want to project, and we just don't have the ability yet to know if those are real or not real, because that's what we saw, this is what we heard, this is, we're trying to define that. Or it could be just our own psyche saying, okay, has to be that, because I don't know what else it could possibly be.
Yeah. With all of these different, well, let me back up for a minute. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on entities that are interacting, visiting, and that sort of thing? There's such a spectrum of, there's everything from the grays to, some people think it's demonic, but then also you have like various races, and you have the Galactic Federation and all these different things. It really is a pretty wide gamut of possibilities. As a remote viewer, as a person who is in touch with kind of spiritual things and things like that, what are your thoughts? Do you have any feelings about what it likely could be in that huge spectrum?
I think that's a pretty broad reality that we're talking about here, and I think any inkling that you have about it is just like the little drop in the bucket of what's going on. We think about our physical world here on Earth, and then we think about all of the reality that can exist beyond that. I mean, it's huge. I tend to believe that we probably live in more of a simulation here. And so we have like real boundaries of how we view things, and our five senses interact with that. You get out of that and you start interacting with things beyond that. I mean, it's very liquid. It's very open-ended, and reality there is created in a very different way than our reality. So I think we're dealing with something that's very much beyond what the human mind or the concept that we have of reality can fathom. Kind of like, my dog. My dog lives in a smaller reality than I do, even though his senses are way, way, way beyond mine in lots of ways. But he lives in a reality of how he knows to survive. And I think humans do the same. We primarily utilize our five senses in order to just survive in life and interact in life to be whole. But I think the reality, once you step out of this reality and into this other reality, that's a whole different ball game of survivalship and what purpose it holds. And my dog would not understand my figuring out my checkbook because it just is not where value is held and how he gets his food and how he's going to protect himself. I mean, he just doesn't understand that. So I think when we go into this alien world or this other reality, they're dealing with completely different value systems than what we hold, and survival to them is completely different. I have to give them kudos of credit, really, because I think they probably have somewhat of a better understanding of all of this than we have. But honestly, I think the human race is kind of moving more and more and quickly into understanding more about this other reality because we'll have to. I think we're just headed that way. We're going into outer space, and we've got to be capable of understanding at least inklings of that. Otherwise, we're just going to be pets out there in the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, oftentimes I feel like there is the zoo and we are the ones in the zoo. I mean, being watched, you know what I mean? But it's interesting because it almost feels like these five senses in some way can be an inhibitor, keeping us from seeing what's really out there. You hear stories of near-death experience or out-of-body experiences and stuff where everything's more vivid, more bright, more alive than what our senses give us. As somebody who, through hypnosis, maybe spiritual means, maybe remote viewing, do you think that these senses that allow us to live in this space actually prevent us from really seeing reality?
Well, I'm going to give credit to the five senses to allow us to maneuver this reality, because that's really what they're here for. But if you want to get into that other space, I mean, we certainly have the ability to go there. Whether it be hypnosis, through deep meditation, getting into these altered brainwave states. That we have a doorway into all of that, and you will have unusual experiences. You may have out of body experiences. Near-death experience takes you there, kind of in a way that you might not want to go, but it's a near-death experience. But you'll still go into that realm. But those are realms that you can enter at your own will by just going into those different brainwave states.
You know, I like the one where you choose it either through meditation. You know, there are people out there that try to do it through chemical means,
Yes,
to
that's the way.
which seems to be very effective. But is it trustworthy? I just worry that one, I think it seems dangerous. Number one, but two, are they really tapping into the same thing, or is it their mind with the drug giving them something weird, or do we know?
I don't know. I don't do the drugs, and I don't know individuals that take that route. Now, I have watched a lot of podcasts that talk about that. They seem to have some kind of enlightenment through that, and it very well may be the exact same thing. In both cases, you're definitely letting go of being aware of your five senses in this physical reality. Now, whether they're entering a more realistic reality or a less realistic reality than someone who goes into deep hypnosis or a meditative state, I don't really know, and I don't know how we would even judge that. I'm not sure if anyone, and I'm sure someone out there has, but I just haven't heard of this. But it would be interesting to know if anyone has measured brain waves while that person is under the influence of various types of drugs, just to see where they are, just to see what kind of how their body anyway is interacting, because it's not all about brain waves, but that does tell you kind of what state they're in.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wonder if anybody's done that. Probably the government, but who knows? We'll never hear about that.
I'm sure the government has done that, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to dive a few different places now. So, have you, maybe even going back earlier in your career of this, your path, have you personally experienced an event that at that time or more recently, that it's tough rationally to explain what you've experienced or through an investigation or working with somebody, and has it caused you to rethink some things? Anything like that that really stands out in your mind from your past?
There's a lot of rethinking over the years because you just have a wealth of more information. One of those things is, synchronicities that's happened to me throughout my life. I've just had an amazing number of those. And, it's so weird, but today I would describe it or give credit, I guess, in such a different way than I would have back when that was happening. At that time, it was just the ooh and ah, and, amazing that this has occurred. But now I would say, oh, I understand now. A lot of that has to do with how we create as human beings, and we just don't even realize we're doing it. And I'll give you a small example of this. I had gone through kind of a healing crisis, and I wasn't really physically and my nervous system wasn't very strong in going back to doing some teaching, but I really wanted to teach a remote viewing class. I learned to do it. I wanted to teach that, but I was a little leery about getting started with it. So it was a strange morning. I was taking a shower and I'm just meditating in my shower, and all of a sudden this impression comes in my meditation that says people are like fruit trees. Everyone produces some kind of a fruit. And I just casually said, okay, what kind of a fruit tree am I? And I said, you're a pear tree. It's like, okay, great, I'm a pear tree. No big deal. So later that morning, I decided to go to this bookstore where I often will buy books. And they have a lot of metaphysical things and books and things. And I walk in the door, they know me there, but they had this new book. And they handed it to me, and they said, oh, we got a book in on remote viewing. We thought you might be interested in this. And I thought, well, I'm not sure. I didn't know the author. I wasn't really looking for that type of material, but it was kind of them to give it to me. So I carried it around the bookstore, and I opened it up just as a curiosity, and I noticed that on like every other page there were these big capital words that said pear, and I'm going, okay, this is really strange. So I bought it, I took it home, and it's like, okay, to me at that point, okay, this is a sign, that I should do the remote viewing class or something. So I started looking for a location where I can rent a room large enough to hold maybe 50 people or so for the class. That was an optimistic number, but, about 50 people. So I'm looking and looking and looking for places that was affordable, to do this. And I came across this one. I really liked the name of it, Empire Hotel, I don't know, something like that. So I drove over where I thought it was. I had the address, and I couldn't find it. It just wasn't there. So I drove back home, looked up the number again, called them, and they said, oh no, that's the right address. We're right here. But it's changed names. It's now the Pear Tree Inn. And it's like, oh my gosh, the pear tree inn, once again, there it is, So I go over and rent the space. It was perfect, had a great turnout of people, and it was just this pair just, continued on and on. Well, at that time, I would have probably said, there's some force in the universe that's coming together, leading me and guiding me toward this. Now I'm going to say, we know things that we want to do, and we're always sending this information out there. And in my latest book, Spy Your Way to Power and Success, I understand now that there's so much that we produce. There's a lot of energy, electromagnetic energy, a lot of radiation comes out of us that goes out there and has impact in various places that pull these synchronicities together for us. Yes, it was inspiring, and I do pay attention to those synchronicities, but I also take more responsibility for them today than I used to. It was everything was out there. Everything was beyond me. Everything was, some other means of being responsible. But I also noticed that a lot of people who have these experiences, whether it be UFOs or, ghost experience, they have an interest, or they develop an interest over time of that. And some people now, Bledsoe, he calls them in, the UFOs. He just calls them in and they come. And I know some UFO people that same thing, they can call them in and there they are. There's a craft, that will appear. And so, there's an interaction that we as human beings have with this phenomena that I don't think we fully understand the responsibility that is in our hands in either producing it or controlling it or having some influence over it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as we're talking about different things, I'm probably jumping to the other end of the spectrum here for a minute. But, there's certain experiences that people have that they're very fearful when they're going through it. And other times people are like, I wasn't afraid. And here's why I'm bringing this question in. I interviewed a person who's done many, many exorcisms, and he talks about the demonic forces that he's dealing with that thrive on fear. They just love seeing the person going through this, go through fear, and they actually get agitated, more excited about that. So, in some experiences that people have, they might say, oh, that's scary. But other people don't have that, right? And so I'm wondering, with the experiences, and it can be anything from a Bigfoot getting scared of that, and some people don't. Do you think fear has anything here? Is there anything that fear is playing into this scenario in any way? I don't know if that's a clear question, but...
it's hard to say. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think where we sit in our emotions has a lot to do with a lot of our experiences that we have. Now, since I'm not just a real tight believer in demonic forces coming in and feeding off of our fear, any more than other forces coming in and feeding off of our love, I don't know that that's altogether true. I do believe it will influence your experiences, however, and I do think that interface between someone trying to reduce that demonic interaction, whatever that might be, can have a big, powerful effect, especially if the two people, the exorcist and the person in the fear demonic state, are in agreement that this is going to work. It will probably work, because I've taken too many people under hypnosis, and if you can get them to see it a different way and believe it a different way, their whole being changes and they are different. Now, that's not an exorcism. That's just the human mind changing the way it perceives things. And as you think and believe and act and interact, that energy goes out there, and that's kind of the reality I think we create. So I know that can be altered and changed. And if someone believes strongly in exorcism, then use an exorcist. That's what I'm going to say. So, but I think... I don't really know if something feeds off of our energy, but there again, I got the pear tree thing, that we do give something out into the world, and so I don't know who's eating my pears. I don't have any idea, but something may be feeding off of whatever pear tree that I produce. If you produced a poisonous, vessel of pain and agony and fear, though, something may be feeding off of that too. You see, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Well, look, we probably have about 12, 13 minutes left. I want to start peel, bringing it down, I want to take a couple minutes at the end here to see what you have going on. Two more questions from me, and then we'll get into that. And I really appreciate the time you've spent here talking about these things. I'm learning a lot just in this hour or so. My thought, and this is a general question, like to go out to everybody, after decades of research in high strangeness on your side, what do you think what do you believe that mainstream science still is completely overlooking?
Well, I think that mainstream science is not looking at the quantum levels of reality yet and understanding how that really impacts everything in our world. If you're still looking at life, in that black and white science world, which I understand they have their hands tied because they can't, but there is a body of people out there that are moving toward that more of that quantum state of reality. And kudos to them because they're looking beyond the little tiny piece of information we've had for so long. It's kind of like looking at Bigfoot as a flesh and blood character and looking at Bigfoot as, wow, what kind of phenomena are we dealing with? When we look at reality just from the mechanics that we have been looking at reality from for so long, we're not seeing the whole picture. But if we start looking at the phenomena that so many people experience every day of their life out here, there's unusual stuff happening that can't be explained. We've got to start looking at reality from a different place. And this whole disclosure thing with UFOs, I think might be a ticket for us to, kind of branch into that because that doesn't operate by the physics that we know. It just doesn't.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. I love that, what you said there about looking at things at the quantum level, because you're right. Like, the old theories don't make sense down there. They just don't. And but that stuff exists, so we have to take it into account, no doubt. Second question here is, if humanity suddenly learned the true nature of UFOs, paranormal, and all that kind of stuff tomorrow, what do you think would shock them the most? Just your general average person.
I think that the average person out here, if they really found out, that these things had the capacity that they have, I think the extraordinary capacities that they have. But honestly, I think that the alien community would tell humans that they have a lot more of that same capacity. They just don't own it or realize it. And I think that would be the hardest thing for humans to realize because we don't own our power.
I love that. Yes, we're more than what we think we are, aren't we? There's much more to us. That's powerful, I think, because there are a lot of people in the world that don't feel any self-worth because, whatever reason. But the thing is, yeah, our potential is amazing. I believe that. So I'm glad you said that.
Well, I would never have, a few years ago, I would never have believed that I could, see the future. I would not have believed I could project myself and be able to view something from without my five senses. To be able to go into a physical body and see all of the issues going on inside of a human being, I would never have thought I could do that. But anyone can do that. It's just part of our ability.
I love that. Yes, don't get locked into thinking of just the four corners, the four angles of your box that you're in. We're more than that. We can get into all kinds of extra things if we just take the time to learn. Linda, this has been great. Linda, you teach. You help people understand a lot about this. Tell us a little about what you do in case anybody is in your area or wants to reach out and learn more from you.
Well, I do classes in person, but I do I have ongoing classes online. They're human development courses. One is Body, Mind, Spirit, the Health Intuitive course, and another one is the Spy course. It teaches you how to see the future, but it also goes into a lot of understanding who you are. You learn a lot about you before you get to the point where you learn how to see the future. So you can determine what you want to see and doing that in a way that's going to be safe and protective of you. I also teach hypnosis, and you can find all those courses on lindaeastburn.com, my website. And my books can be found on Amazon, I have 4 books out. Those can be found on Amazon or on my webpage, either one. And I'm also on Facebook, and just come be my friend on Facebook. I'm always posting things and talking with people, and I do a lot of just small, short online classes, a couple hours long or so. And those are always free.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us, Linda, and this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you're busy, and this has been a great. I've walked out of this learning some things, and there's nothing better than somebody who's been thinking and involved in this space or multiple spaces for so long. I've only been in it for a couple of years, and I've learned so much, so I can imagine, and that's why I'm happy to hear from you on this. But Linda, let me keep you on the line here as we close things down. But for everybody out there you go, Linda Eastburn. She's doing some great things. Check into what she's doing, get some books, and expand your mind. Learn more, right? We are more than what we think we are. Everybody out there, thank you very much. Linda, have an amazing summer. And everybody out there, thanks for following with us. Take care and catch you next time. Hi, we need your help to get bigger and better. How? Just like, comment, and subscribe. It's free and it only takes a few seconds. So thank you, and remember, there's a lot of strange and unexpected in our reality, so always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open and stay safe. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.